There's a difference between understanding an ancient text has something to say to a modern audience and reading an ancient text like it's a modern text. That's not the same thing. If you read an ancient text like it's a modern text, you're prone to all kinds of misinterpretations and mistakes. So the best way we can honor the ancient text in a modern context is to really do our best to not just read the Bible, but to study the Bible. To study the Bible. And I want to give you some handles for that, and this is going to serve you hopefully the rest of your life. For some of us, it may cause us to have to go backwards a little bit in some of the things we've been taught or told or learned or read and interpreted, but it'll serve you in the future if you do it well. Start with this concept. Whenever you read your Bible, reading the Bible is a cross-cultural experience. It's a cross-cultural experience. Last year, Shaylin and I, my wife, we went to South Africa, all right? We started here in Columbus, Ohio, went to New York, and then we ended up down here in South Africa. We went to 3 cities in South Africa. We went to Johannesburg, Durban, and Cape Town. Before we left, I did some study on South Africa. I did some research. I read up on some stuff. I knew, before I ever knew I was going to South Africa, I knew a little bit about South Africa. I knew who Nelson Mandela was. I knew what apartheid was. I knew a little bit about the history, but I didn't know a whole lot. So I went in, I watched some documentaries, I read some articles, I went into Wikipedia, come on somebody. I went to Google Images, and I looked up some pictures from Cape Town and Table Rock and some of these different things, and I learned a little bit about the history. Am I now a know-it-all as it relates to South Africa? The answer is absolutely not. I know just enough to get on the plane and to fly there. Once I got there, as I'm there, because of some of the research I had done, a little bit more that I knew about the history, it helped me understand and decode a conversation I had with the man sitting next to me on the flight from Johannesburg to Durban, who was a native of South Africa, and so he's telling me things, and I wouldn't have picked it all up had I not done some research, so I was picking up what he was putting down. Otherwise, a lot of it would have gone over my head. Now, am I now a know-it-all about South Africa? Absolutely not. I'm a student of South Africa. In fact, even if I lived there for 5 or 10 years, even if I was born there, I still wouldn't be a know-it-all about, or shouldn't be a know-it-all about South Africa. I would want to learn as much as I could because someone else's perspective is different. Something else is going on in this other city. And so there's much more to learn. Unfortunately, and those of you that have traveled abroad, you know that sometimes Americans have an international reputation for the way we travel internationally. Essentially, we think a lot of our culture, and Americans often try to bend the cultures of the world around our culture. Just so you know, when you go out there, no matter how nice they are to you at the resort, because they'd like a tip, that's what they say when they go back in these Americans. Because Americans get off the plane and they say stuff like this: why are they driving on the wrong side of the road? That food tastes bad. Those clothes are weird. Americans, and nobody in this room, you guys wouldn't do that type of thing. Some of your fellow Americans are known globally to go into cultures and look at all those cultures based on just our culture. I'm gonna tell you, a lot of Bible readers tend to do the same thing and often go into the cross-cultural experience of the Bible and read it straight through an American 2023 lens, which often causes us to miss things. There's so much to learn. Become a student of the Bible. Take the same attitude that would be proper if you were going to travel the entire globe. Imagine you were going to go to South Africa. When would you become a know-it-all? When? Never. You would always be a student. You'd be wanting to learn something new about the culture. You'd be wanting to learn a new nuance of the history. If you got in a plane and you went to Turkey, what would you do? You'd want to learn about the Ottoman Empire. You'd want to learn about why that statue is there, why it says that. You'd want to learn about the language. And so just like a good world traveler, we do the same with our Bible. Think about this now. Think about your translations. You read the Bible in English, you're reading not just a translation, but an interpretation. So let's take it like this. I got 2 friends that speak Spanish. Ricardo, he studied Spanish. Romeo, who grew up speaking Spanish. He grew up in a Latin American country, okay? I know Ricardo better than I know Romeo. Romeo speaks a certain kind of dialect, a certain type of Spanish. Ricardo didn't grow up speaking Spanish. It's his second language. If I was speaking and they were both translating in Spanish, I might say something, and Romeo would say one thing, and Ricardo would say something else. Wouldn't be the exact same languages because there's not a word-for-word translation. What is Ricardo doing? He's doing it based on not only the Spanish he speaks, but his relationship to me. I'm closer with Ricardo than I am Romeo. So Ricardo might take some liberties and going, no, I know this dude. I know what he meant by that. And Romeo's like, but he said that. And Ricardo's like, but he didn't mean that. So now Ricardo and Romeo are arguing about how they should interpret my English into Spanish. Good news is now, 2023, we're actual people. They can come to me and say, what did you really mean? And I could give them paragraphs about what I actually meant. And then they could figure it out. When you're reading Moses, writing in Genesis 1, that was 3,400 years ago. It's a cross-cultural experience. He's speaking in the ancient Near East. He's been impacted by ancient Near East cosmologies. What's cosmology? Cosmology is how the universe was ordered. He went to Cairo Academy. Not really, but you understand, like, remember the story of Moses? Pharaoh's killing all the little Israelite boys, remember that? And his mom puts him in a basket, and Pharaoh's daughter finds him and says, I'm gonna adopt this kid. And she brings him into Pharaoh's house. It'd be like you and I ending up somehow in the White House. And so what kind of education do you think he got? He got an outstanding Harvard, Ivy League, Egyptian education. And so he understood the Mesopotamian cosmologies. He understood the Assyrian cosmologies. He understood all these things. So when you read Genesis 1, 2, 3, you're going to see that if you compare it to other ancient Near East cosmologies, there's some similarities of things coming out of the water and some of the beliefs. In fact, it helps. It helps, and again, you can be dogmatic as you want about, like, one of the things when I was studying Genesis 1, 2, and 3, and I was just trying to educate myself further, I'm reading a lot of stuff, and I'm seeing, like, Christians just shredding each other. Because some Christians believe that Adam and Eve were real people, and that it was a 7-day creation, exactly, 24-hour, 7 days. And then others believe it was an allegory. And so you have, I think, Christians that are fighting for a 7-day creation, and they're fighting for that really hard because they don't want to take away from the veracity and the validity of the scriptures, okay? They don't want to add something, right? Or maybe they were taught that, and so because of that, they feel that if it was an allegory, then it wouldn't be true. Well, hold on a second. Now, I'm not here to take a stance on whether it was 7 days or whether it's an allegory. I wasn't there. And I don't get to ask Moses. I've got my opinions. I've done an insane amount of study. I definitely don't. I've already over my time for this part. But what I'm going to say is, you got to understand why Moses wrote this book. Otherwise, you'll start arguing about science in Genesis 1 and 2, and you'll miss the point of what Moses was trying to do. If you understand the way Moses thought, it wasn't until 1492 that Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So when Moses in 1400 BC said, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, what comes to your mind, what comes to my mind, is not what was in Moses' mind. So the heavens and the earth, you might think of a celestial city or something beyond the clouds, and the earth, you think of a globe. It wasn't until 1960 we had a picture, or in the 60s, we had actually a picture of the globe, but we all have it as common knowledge. It's 2023. We know the earth is round. In Moses' day, the cosmology, the belief was that the earth was flat, the sky was a dome, the stars were fixed to the ceiling like Truman Show, and God's up there like Ed Harris, and the sun is revolving around the earth. That's what they thought. Moses didn't write Genesis 1, 2, and 3 to make scientific statements. He's talking theological statements. He's talking about the nature of God. He's talking about the nature of relationship. You got to understand this, because have your opinion, but lower your dukes. Do your research. Do some stuff. Don't be intimidated by science. And certainly understand that whatever your opinion is probably worth listening to maybe where someone else thinks as well. And by the way, understand Moses didn't write Genesis 1 and 2, so you could take Genesis 1 and 2 and tell the quantum physicist and the biologist how dumb they are. What he was doing was trying to put something in your hand that maybe you can go to the quantum physicist and the biologist and help them with their marriage.